So you were from here, you came here as a child?
I came here on holiday as a child.
Yeah.
From when I was about 6. And the other inhabitants of the village then were leftover elderly people. Brothers and sisters, childless couples, because an awful lot of people had left, and there was this great exodus to Glasgow for better work. Subsistence crofting was no longer an option in the mid-20th century.
So crofting was what people were here for?
Crofting and fishing. There were people who'd been cleared here from the Vale of Strathnaver in the 19th century, so they were clinging on to the edge anyway. It isn't really possible to make a living out of crofting. It never was, not on this land.
And you say that nowadays nobody who was an original person from here is still here. Everybody's kind of an incomer. What are they called as well, those people?
White settlers. But who's here who's sort of original? There's one man who is the retired headmaster who lives in Lochainver but has a place he stays when he comes here because he's inherited crofts here, and he owns the Highland cattle and quite a lot of the sheep. And there's another person whose father was born here who worked in Glasgow all his life but is retired here. And has crofts and sheep.
You say in the winter it's really dark and there's very few people here because
you've got to want to be here, to be really settled here in winter, because it's daylight between about 10 and 3 and it's not very good quality light, and we don't get a lot of snow because we're west coast, it's Gulf Stream, but we get terrible gales and rain, and it's wearing, and I think that's why it's difficult to be an old person here.
I see.
Although it's a community where over the last few years official public service support for the elderly has diminished with funding cuts, but there's a strong volunteering ethos. And people do help one another out, but it does get to a point where it's not viable to stay here.
I noticed the graveyard back there, that presumably people do stay, live and die here.
Yes.
To some degree.
Yes. I mean, there are local people in other villages. Clachtall has a few local people out at Kilkee. There are, yes, there's a gathering. And there's a revival of Gaelic, and particularly even incomer children learning Gaelic and singing in Gaelic. When I was a child, the local people here spoke Gaelic.
Oh, wow.
But never in front of a non-Gaelic speaker. It's part of the etiquette of Scottish Gaelic speakers.
So how has it changed since you were a kid, do you feel?
Oh, it's changed beyond recognition. It stopped being the tail end of a traditional Highland crofting community. It's gone through a period of crisis in about the 1980s when really it was dying. And then the crofting law about the sale of house plots changed and opened up the possibility of getting outline planning permission and decrofting land and selling plots for houses to be built on. That really has revived the place.
So that's interesting. It's one of my pet difficulties about cycling around the coast is finding all of these stunning places where somebody sold the land to someone else, so that the public can't, or me on a bike, can't go there and camp there. And I think, who is it who sold this plot of land to the highest bidder?
Well, Scotland still has no law of trespass.
Yes, yeah.
So technically, you can go there.
Yeah.
But are you talking about big plots of land?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking to myself, I look around these hills and I think, who gets the right to sell a plot of the hill to someone?
Right. Well, what you have to understand is this is all big estates. But what you're on at the moment is the North Assynt estate, which was a community buyout. It was the first community buyout. And if you're recording this, I won't hazard the date. I think it was the 1990s. So this land's owned by the people. But that's not the same as selling plots for houses. That's individual people who have bought their crofts rather than being estate tenants on their crofts, who then apply to the Crofting Commission to have a plot taken out of crofting and sold to put a house on. And you'll see a lot of those round here.
So, it sounds a bit technical, all this, but...
It's very complicated. Scots law is different from English law, completely different. And crofting law is a law unto itself.
So can people make new plots of land which they can then buy? Can someone sell a new plot of land?
But it's governed by Highland Council planning and by the Crofters Commission. Crofters Commission will decroft land for a number of purposes. It can be amenity ground, which means somebody wants to make a garden or something, because croft land is supposed to be kept in agricultural production.
I see, yeah.
And technically can be confiscated if it hasn't been used for agriculture for 10 years.
So have you seen a lot of new houses here, or do you feel like it's the old houses? So they've been giving licences, because presumably they want a balance of not too few but not too many.
Yes. And they'll decide when it's getting too cramped in a particular area, and there'll be a period during which no planning permission will be given, and then it'll open up again. But you'd be surprised, actually, that's a brand new house.
What, the white one?
Yes.
Oh, well.
It's very eco-friendly, and it was designed to look like one of the Victorian croft houses.
It really fits
but,
in.
I mean, you can see also that there are other obviously new houses, and some old ones. And I mean, people inherited cramped, damp cottages and knocked them down and built modern bungalows on the site.
They're able
and you can't blame them.
Yeah. So, just finally, I'm kind of really interested in how it's different for you. You've obviously seen, you've lived a life from a child to an adult to see this place really different.
Yeah.
And is there a sense of something missing from a community, or is there something gained from the newcomers, or is it a mixture? Or?
Well, you see, I'm a funny hybrid myself. I suppose I'm an incomer. Really, my parents are incomers, and I don't live here full time, but I do go back a long way with the place. It's difficult because, of course, I've changed.
Yeah.
I've grown up, grown old during that period, and there are losses and gains. But this is a viable community in the 21st century. People are moving in. We've got a shortage of affordable housing. It's that old story.
Yeah.
And a shortage of long-term rental property, because everything rentable is a holiday cottage.
Yeah.
Because there's so much money to be made from
I can imagine. I can see.
So it's difficult for young people of working age to decide to move here, but they do. And they're increasingly doing so.
I was wondering whether some of the people who move here from elsewhere are people sort of searching for this kind of middle of nowhere sense, and kind of almost want to be left alone because they're trying to get to nowhere.
A few are like that, but I would say most people who move here love being part of the community, are very gregarious, and just want to...
Off the road. A car. I can't believe the traffic around here.
Well, it's the North Coast 500.
There's one every half hour.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
There's more than that in July. Caravans.
I bet.
But no, people move here because it's clean. They move here because they want their children to grow up somewhere where they can roam safely and be in a small class in a village school and can learn about nature and the world. And clean air, dark skies. We're one of the dark places of Europe.
For the stars, you
mean?
For
the stars.
Yeah. So
why wouldn't you want to bring children up here?
Fantastic. Last two things I'm thinking of. One is, was there a lot of
it's all right.
Was there a lot of like singing together back when you were a kid? Was there
there still is.
Oh, is there? Is there a community?
Yes, there are ceilidhs. Some of them are impromptu in people's houses. Sometimes there's just a get-together. Ceilidh is a very flexible word, but there are also organised ceilidhs. There's a lot of activity, small-scale fundraising locally.
Okay.
And we've got a village hall along, just 2 miles out of the village, along at Store, and there's a lot going on there.
Okay.
I mean, I can't get on with my work up here because my social life is so good.
Okay, final question. Do you know any Gaelic still?
I don't, and I never did.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you to say something in Gaelic.
No. I grew up...
Gaelic, is it?
It's Gaelic.
Gaelic.
Yes, Scots Gaelic. Scots Gaelic, Irish Gaelic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I grew up on the northeast coast and I was coming here on holiday as a child. So the northeast of Scotland doesn't speak Gaelic.
Ah, yes.
And I'm just lazy.
Okay.
Life's too short.
Thank you so much.
That's all right.
That's fantastic.